So welcome everyone to this presentation about the methodological framework for the sustainability and health initiative for NetPositive Enterprise, the SHINE Handprint Assessment. So we all know and we all use the life cycle assessment to calculate environmental, social, and economic environmental impacts, here called footprints. So in my research, I focus currently on life cycle assessment of electric scooters and also on beverage packaging. But electric scooters have a short lifetime, and thus we can talk about negative footprint. Also, we are all aware of the plastic marine litter problem, and that's also a negative footprint. So don't you all agree that life cycle assessment and footprints bring nothing but bad news? And also Dalai Lama recognized that in his book, A Force for Good, the Dalai Lama's Visions for our World. And he pointed out that our continuous diet of bad news, such as the scientific evidence for severe environmental dangers, comes without adding what concrete actions we might take to counter the perils. And the result is we feel powerless, that things are out of control. He also added that our footprint of negative impacts makes people feel guilty, ashamed, or otherwise uneasy. So that leads people to tune out in order to feel better. However, millennial generation wants to make positive changes both on societal and individual level. And that means that there is a call for a metric that not only measures financial performance, but also measures positive and negative impact on society. However, the current footprint only framework has some limitations. On one side, we have limitations of footprint, which is inability of organizations, individuals to achieve zero footprint. And then sometimes reducing the organization's individuals' own footprint is often a minor change. On the other side, we have a problem of accountability. For example, organization individuals' negative change, such as greenwashing, lobbying, may be invisible. And then there's also no accountability. Even when the company organization commits to a change, there's no accountability for organization or individual to make that positive change. So until now, we lacked a calculus to measure beneficial impacts. But then now we can measure positive impacts with handprints. So Norris, he coined a term of handprints, which was endorsed as a method to track our personal impact and all of our better ecological practices. For example, turning off light switches, biking instead of driving. And it is believed that handprint, this positive attitude and concept will keep engages us in positive motivation, and because of that, we'll keep going. So what are handprints? So on the right side, we have a footprint, which is defined as a social, environmental, and economic impacts of our business as usual. And on the left side, we have a handprint, which is defined as social, environmental, economic impact of positive changes. But we can have voluntary reductions in footprints we create on our own, and we call that internal handprint, which is in essence changes within the scope of the actor's footprint, and then that equates to reduction in our own footprint. On the other side, we can have voluntary reductions in footprint, those of others, and this equates to external handprints, which are changes outside the scope of actor's footprint. The total handprint is a sum of internal and external handprints. So the overall definition of a handprint is Handprints are voluntary, positive changes that we create relative to business as usual, measured in footprint units. So where can we create handprints? If we start with one organization, we can create a handprint and call it internal handprint within our supply chain. And that we call a footprint reduction. By our supply chain, we can give an example of a carton packaging manufacturer where their supply chain would be packaging manufacturing or even forestry. And then we could have an external handprint, which we could affect changes and create handprints on our customer chain, such as in this example, consumers that buy our beverages. And then we could also affect change within our employees and then within the supply chain actors and then with the customer chain actors. And beyond that, we can make positive impacts which are not footprint reductions elsewhere, such as gender equality, and also impact on the rest of humanity's footprint through, for example, policy change. And we call that a handprint creation. So how are handprints calculated? Of course, we use the life cycle assessment for that. And similar to carbon footprint, water footprint, biodiversity footprint, and poverty footprint metrics, we have carbon handprint, water handprint, biodiversity handprint, poverty handprint, etc. And so the sustainability and health initiative for NetPositive Enterprise Shine project focus on developing a robust, comprehensive, and standardized methods for handprint assessment, which is currently under review. Who can create the handprint? So organizations and individuals can create handprints, and one of the mechanisms to create handprints is innovations. So within our Shine project, we have several companies that we are currently working on assessing the handprints of their innovations. And then we have several companies in which we affect changes through initiatives, and finally we could also affect changes through investments. But today I'll be focusing on handprints of the sustainability initiative. So one application of a handprint assessment can be used to measure sustainability effectiveness of project-based courses. And at MIT, within the Sloan Business School, we have a course called a Business Sustainability Lab, or shortened SLab. And so in the United States, business schools use a project-based learning to educate on sustainability. And in project-based learning, students actively engage in real-world projects. So these are some of the schools that offer this type of courses, like Harvard, Duke, Michigan, and Cornell. But today we'll be focusing on Business Sustainability Lab from the MIT's School of Management. So according to the school, SLab provides opportunity for students to make an impact, but that is not currently being measured. So the overall objective of this project was how and was SLab improving environmental sustainability. And in other words, historically, how and how much SLab reduced the environmental impacts of partnering organizations. So the goals were to propose a method and calculate SLab's environmental handprint, and second, to define procedures to measure and track future SLab's handprint. So what kind of changes students were making for an organization? On one side, they were improving their internal operations. So we talk about internal changes. And on the other side, they were increasing the market share of the good stuff. And these count as external changes. For example, on the internal changes, we have an example of CO2 recovery for a beer producer, and then also increasing the recycling rate of the aluminum cans. So these all projects fall in the category of waste recovery, recycling, and zero waste. On the other side, regarding the external and increasing the good stuff is solar panels. So how can we, the students were focusing on increasing the market share of solar panels in different regions, and then of the plant-based meat and renewable investments. All of these projects fall into the potential categories of reducing the greenhouse gas emissions. So the sum of n project reductions would count as a SLab's positive impact or handprint. So I'll be focusing now on the example of the beer company, and and we'll showcase calculating handprint of one project. For these purposes, we're calculating the greenhouse gas emission reductions, and we use, again, the life cycle assessment to do that. So this is the flow chart of the beer production, and from the raw materials production to brewing process to packaging. And we can see that several of these processes are using carbon dioxide. But carbon dioxide is currently purchased, and they're purchasing this carbon dioxide from ethanol plant in New York State, and so it means that this carbon dioxide has to travel 9,000 miles per year from New York State to Maine, where the beer company is located. Also, some of these processes are venting the CO2, which is currently released to air. So the students recommended a change for that company and to collect the carbon dioxide and to use or reuse the CO2 in their operations. If the company adopts that change, it will result in 29 tons of CO2 equivalent reduced per year, which we call, we can attribute to SLab and call it SLab handprint. Second goal was to provide some recommendations to increase SLab's future handprint and future measurability and traceability. So we proposed that SLab could integrate tracking, inventory, and calculating handprint into their project outcomes. And second, more importantly, currently we don't have any information if the recommendation was adopted within the organization. So we proposed to add attestation or establishing a feedback loop where the organization reports back maybe a year or 2 years after the projects and states whether that recommendation through this project was adopted. Our expected results are that SLab is improving sustainability, and the calculated SLab handprint can serve as a benchmark for tracking future SLab handprint. Broader research impact, we hope that SLab may inspire transferability, and by using this method, we can create more impactful sustainability courses. And here are my acknowledges on the left side for the SHINE MIT team and for all the SHINE members that are participating in our project. So finally, I would like to send out a message. Everybody join the action and become the driving force of positive changes. Thank you for your attention, and now we can proceed with some questions.
This is good, Jasmina. How does it compare to, have you calculated SLab's footprint just to understand the handprint? Not sure relevant or not.
Can you repeat your question? Just a moment.
The handprint, how does it compare to SLab's footprint?
Yeah, so we currently have, we do, in the end, we do such comparison. However, the SLab's footprint, we're not able to calculate the SLab's footprint at the moment to the great detail. Currently, what we have is the Sloan School of Management, so the whole business school footprint, which accounts for only for the buildings occupation and not all the travel that happens and materials that are used. So we currently don't have the SLab's footprint in place to do that comparison.
Hi, Jasmina. This is a nice case study, I think, to show, especially showcase the external handprints. In one of your slides, you showed how the supply chain portion, the upstream and your own operations could be thought of as footprint reduction type.
Yeah, like the invoice flag. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. But just curious on your thoughts there. When we talk about products and product innovations, which help the ultimately help the customer reduce emissions. Say we are creating a new more efficient appliance or UPS or even a component which enables the overall device that it's going in, that's going to be say more energy efficient and such. So kind of the emissions from the use of such components, is would you say that that's the external handprint, or would it also be in a way it's within this footprint, within my scope 3 footprint as per the GHG protocol? So I was a bit confused whether it's a footprint reduction or a handprint creation.
So it's well, both are under our methods, both are called handprints. It's just whether it's internal and external. And in this flag, I put that the footprint reduction is all the backstream processing. Mm-hmm. So the supply chain left of organization. So the customer, your customer is a consumer, so that will count on the external handprint.
So does this mean that we have to have attestations from the customer, mandatorily in order to qualify as external handprint?
Well, currently, for the purposes of the assessment, we don't, but we could think about how to establish this kind of tracking of the impact. Similar what I'm doing with the students' projects. We cannot verify whether the change was adopted and how the change was adopted, whether there was like a mandatory change or there are some things that are not currently in place. So it's hard to also get from the consumer the attestation at this point. But hopefully in the future, we could put something in place that would enable us to do that as the method evolves, right?
Yes, this is Christian. Avantika, I think this is an extremely important aspect on this attestation, and I like what I hear in this discussion. I think it's important that we strengthen the idea that both footprints but also handprints are embarking on LCA methodology, which would then mean identify potentials. Why, if it comes to accounting and allocating something to an organization over a time of year, which would then be also the invitation for the greenhouse gas protocol to be used, this delivers also something like a footprint in the handprint. But I think for making proper accounts, one needs also that type of attestation mechanism to understand better which volumes are realized that have been, let's say, identified as potentials or opportunities using techniques like life cycle assessment. So I think it's, unfortunately, we use similar wording for two different types of approaches in essence. And account attestation could play a role for both.
Right. Yeah, I was just wondering if we had those kind of details worked out some more, at this point of time in this consortium. I mean, I'm just thinking further. Suppose the organization made a car and, improved its fuel efficiency. They usually, there are certain assumptions, right, over what would be the driving cycle, number of kilometers, and maybe the pattern of driving, the acceleration, the range, and all of that. And based on that, you have some fuel efficiency numbers published or even claimed, and then you could say that, compared to my previous model of business as usual, if this car is used in the same way, then this is the potential handprint. And then again, now the question comes about making claims and then attestations.
Yeah, there's also a question of whether innovation happened naturally, or it was like, or the company has speed up in innovation in some way. So that's another big challenge to define, because in our method, everything, only voluntary actions and voluntary positive changes are considered a handprint. So if that was like a business as usual plan in innovation, it would not count as a handprint.
Okay. Yeah, I think we need to dig into this further because when we talk about businesses, I mean, the whole process of innovation is to kind of push business as usual, right? Yes. Push aside business as usual. It is still voluntary. It is not regulatory. Sometimes you're doing an innovation or you're making a change just in order to, say, catch up with the competition, but you might still be, racing ahead to kind of beat your competition also. So I think maybe those are some more, ways we need to look carefully on defining innovation.
I agree. There are different options for innovation. Sometimes the innovation is also sponsored, but then in that case, if it's sponsored, if somebody else is stimulating the innovation, then it will be a handprint of that organization who stimulates the innovation, but then it would be a footprint reduction for a company. So depending on where you set up your actors and who are your actors, so that's one important thing that we need to always be mindful about, finding the actors and where the change is coming from, whether it's coming from an organization or there's an external organization who is pushing the innovation.
Right.
This is Christian again. I think just thinking about the car example, that's we don't produce cars, so it's probably an easy one. But I think if you would account for your cars that you would be producing, then you would of course assume how much they emit over their lifetime, and that's all in your scope 3 then for having these products. And if you reduce that amount, then this reduces the amount of emissions that can be allocated to your company, and then it's a footprint reduction, and that's brilliant. So first of all, we shouldn't, let's say, dilute the beauty of footprint reductions simply because something comes in as a handprint. But if we could say that the new cars that we would have produced are setting a benchmark in industry, forcing all other car manufacturers to produce likewise performance, then of course this has a positive impact on the entire car industry. And we can't account for this yet, but we could say this is part of our mission to get all the others doing their job better. And by simply doing our job in an excellent way, we create a positive impact that's far larger than just what we can account for reasonably by using the greenhouse gas protocol, for example. And this type of, let's say, additional activities or consequences that you could create by your innovation, this is to me illustrating what handprints could be about. But I admit also that this is complex matter. If you then also would say that you, above whatever you would expect as business as usual, push your innovations into the market, so reducing your footprint more drastically by more even let's say more measures than you would usually do, then we could also say that this is a quite positive aspect that you couldn't probably that easily, which wouldn't shine up if you just would account for this as a footprint reduction. So if you have a kind of drastic footprint reduction or faster than your business development, then you would also probably like to speak about this as being an acceleration outside your normal scope. So this is probably the one that is a bit difficult to catch as direct handprint, but one could also argue that this one couldn't be, let's say, measured in simple footprint and accounting terms. So whenever our systems fail to account for the good that we do, we look for other ways to account for this, and then at least that leads me as a personal opinion into handprinting, rather than saying I'm finding another name for something that I'm going to do anyway.
I really good, really very nice thoughts there, Christian. I mean, this I think is a very powerful way to put in the context of innovation, and also how beyond your first targeted customer of your innovation or market space, but how it kind of creates these ripple effects beyond just that in different ways. Yeah. That could certainly be the handprint, or external handprint rather.